Okay, real quick, I threw together this really bad video to explain 10 reasons why AMC is about to go to the moon. Let's begin. Number one, relevant short interest. Currently, short interest is sitting at about 15%, which is modest, nothing too crazy, but it has been on the upward trend, which is what's important. This is since 2023 September. Now, number two, the MACD and the TD9 on the quarterly time frame looks pretty symmetrical to me. This MACD here is when we ran in 2021 back in May, and then of course when you look at the TD9, it is the first bull sign TD9 on the quarterly, and again it looks very symmetrical. MACD looks very symmetrical. So that's number two. Number three, we have a massive volume candle that came in May of this year. If you look on the monthly, it would show in May, but on the quarterly, it is still visible, and it is the most volume that's ever came in one quarter in AMC's history, with a total of 3.7 billion shares traded. It's quite a bit. Now, number four, earnings growth. Since the pandemic and well before, obviously this big dip here in total equity and the big dip here in total assets took a hit during COVID. Now, the good news is that since then, essentially, it's been slowly but surely on the right trajectory upwards. Number five, revenue is almost back to pre-pandemic levels. We're sitting at 5.47 billion at the fiscal year 2019. Fiscal year for 2024 won't be out until a couple of quarters from now, but we have 4.81 billion, so we're almost back to those pre-pandemic levels and on the rise annually since 2019. Number six, net income is almost positive. Again, we have a upwards trend for the most part when it comes to net income, with a slight dip in 2022. But since then, no, actually, it is a solid trend. So we're almost positive in net income as well. So again, another factor pointing towards the upside. Number seven, massive increase institutionally. Now, this goes back to the massive volume candle that I talked about a second ago. Because if you look at all these investors, that's a pretty big percentage increase in positions, and this happened as late as last quarter of 6/30/2024, which more than certainly coincides with that massive volume candle, the most in history that I was talking about. So one must think, why would all of these big asset managers acquire this stock at this price to the extent where it's been the most ever in its history? Don't know. Maybe they want to short it. Number eight, IV percentile hit 1%, and this was on last Friday. And since then, it has now risen to 2%. That is good. What this means is that IV percentile being at 1 to 2% means that only 1 or 2% of the time within the last year has the IV been lower than it is right now. And we have a low historical volatility as well. Number nine, we're going to look at the Greeks and the second order Greeks for the entire options chain for AMC. We're just going to go through this real quick. If you look at the Ultima versus the strike price for calls and puts, you can see how it starts to fan out, and we have activity, way out into the teen strike prices. You look at the color versus the strike price. Look at the Zama versus the strike price. Speed versus the strike price. Beta versus the strike price. Charm versus the strike price. And again, you have orange puts, blue calls. Vama versus the strike price. Vanna versus the strike price. Now, Vanna is important because it can be seen as support when it comes to the options visually. But again, second order Greeks are pretty complex. So if you know what these mean, then you can clearly see what I'm trying to get at here. Theta versus strike price. Interesting to me that the theta is much lower, which is bad. It means you lose more money for puts. A lot of the puts over the calls. That's another bullish signal. Delta versus the strike price. This should be symmetrical if the market makers are doing their job right, which it does look pretty symmetrical for the most part. But what you see, something's missing right here at the 25 strike. You have X's on the 5, the 0, the 10, the 15, the 20, but not the 25. So take note of that. Gamma versus the strike price. You have highest gamma, obviously, at the money right here. Pretty symmetrical with calls and puts. However, if you go over to the next line over, about looks like 6 to 8. No, I'm sorry, that would be about 5.5 to 6 strike. You have way more calls up here coming into the mix than the puts. So interesting to look at this this way. We have Vega versus the strike price. Again, this is all sporadic, all over the place. And then finally, of course, number 10, the most important reason why AMC is about to moon is because we're gay. I mean, we own the float. Have a good night, folks.